take, for example, what's happening in today's market, the conglomerates, which have been seizing up all sorts of... We happen to live in a hotel that's run by a conglomerate. Why should ITT, for example, run a hotel? And how are you going to stop that?
Well, first place, once again...
Without government, without some government intervention.
It's government measures that have promoted the conglomerates. The major reason we have conglomerates is because they are a very effective way to get around a whole batch of tax legislation. Let me ask a different question. Who is more affected by government regulations, by government controls?
I thought I was supposed to ask the questions. But I was warned that you might turn these on me.
But tell me, who's more affected? The big fella, who can deal with it, who can have a separate department to handle the red tape, or the poor fella?
Well, the big fella can always take care of himself under any system.
Right, and therefore you want a system which gives the big fella the least advantage. And the system under which he can get government to help him out gives him the most advantage, not the least. You say, am I afraid of greed, of lack of cooperation? Of course. But we always have to compare the real with the real. What are the real alternatives? And if we look at the record of history, if we go back to the 19th century, which everybody always points to as the era of the robber baron who strode around the land and ground the poor under his heel, what do we find? The greatest outpouring of voluntary charitable activity in the history of the world. This University of Chicago is an example. It was founded by contributions by John D. Rockefeller and other people. The colleges and universities throughout the Midwest. If you go back and ask when was the Red Cross founded, when was the Salvation Army founded, when were the Boy Scouts founded, you'll discover all of that came during the 19th century in the era of unregulated, rapacious capitalism.
Milton, I'd like to go back for a minute to the question of conglomerates. Granted that what you say, that the government policies, concentration of central government, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, are responsible for the growth of conglomerates. What should you do about them now?
No
should
doubt.
Government try to undo them? Or should anybody try to undo them?
No.
Or should you just let them fail? What would you do?
You should let them fail, of course. I am strongly opposed to government bailing any of them out. You should let them fail. The best things you can do, in my opinion, are first to have complete free trade, so you can have conglomerates in other countries compete with conglomerates in this country. We may have only 2 or 3 automobile companies, but there's Toyota, there's Volkswagen. Competition from abroad is effective. But in the second place...
And when you say complete free trade, you mean all over the world?
No, sirree. I mean the United States all by itself, unilaterally, should eliminate all trade barriers. We would be better off if all the other countries did the same.
What do you think would happen if we just did it, though?
I think we'd be very much better off, and a lot of others would then follow our example. That's what happened in the 19th century when Great Britain in 1846 completely removed unilaterally all trade barriers. So that I'm not...
You don't think this country would be flooded with goods of all kinds from all over the world, maybe cheaper, and that we wouldn't have great unemployment in this country?
What would the people who sold us goods do with their money? They'd get dollars. What would they do with the dollars? Eat them? If they want to send us goods and take dollars in return, we're delighted to have it. No. No, that's not a problem as long as you have a free exchange rate, because we cannot export without importing. We cannot import without exporting. You would not have a reduction in employment. What you would have would be a different pattern of employment. You'd have more employment in export industries and less employment in those industries that compete with import. But go back to conglomerates, Larry, for a moment. I just want to ask a very different kind of a question. Conglomerates are not very attractive. I would much rather have a lot of small enterprises. But there's all the difference in the world between a private conglomerate and a government conglomerate. In general, the government conglomerate can get money from you without your agreeing to give it to them. You and I pay for Amtrak and for the postal deficit, whether we use the services of Amtrak or the postal deficit or not. I don't pay your conglomerate unless I rent one of their apartments. I get something for my money. So bad as private conglomerates are, they're less bad than one of the alternatives.
Milton, suppose I agree with almost everything you say and say it would be wonderful if we were starting from scratch.
Almost everything I say, you're a unique human being.
I didn't say I do. I don't say I do agree, but I said suppose I agree for the sake of argument. we can't start from scratch.
No.
How do we undo what we have? How do we undo what we have done?
That's the hardest.
How would you undo it? Not me.
That's the hardest problem, and I agree. That is the real question. How do we get from where we are to where we want to go? And we can't get there overnight. We cannot get there by simply eliminating the things that should not have been done. As in the case of Social Security, we have it, and we've got to live up to our obligations. So we do have to develop a series of policies which will enable us gradually to move from where we are to where we want to be. The first and most important step, in my opinion, is to stop moving in the wrong direction.